December 1st. I've seen some stuff in my time, but this is probably some of the worst. I'm standing in an alley in downtown Atlanta, and looking at the body of a young girl. Not young. She wasn't out selling cookies, after all, but young enough to remember what her senior graduation song was. Maybe that song was even running through her head like a hyperactive rabbit, while whatever John was on top of her was thinking that she was the sweetest lay he'd ever had, and she was thinking about finally getting that landlord off her case. She was a working girl, Lisa Summer, and she had a rap sheet longer than the pool of spreading blood around her. Someone had murdered her. That was why I was here. "Well, detective, what do you think?" Jeffries asked. Jeffries is a good kid. Reminds me a little of my own son the last time I saw him, with that clean-cut Boy Scout look that any mother would be proud of. He had his jacket zipped up over his suit coat, and he still looked like one more stiff wind would finish him off. He was hungry for answers, just like I was, and he'd pound his beat all night, if that's what it took. I respected him for that. "I think some twist was out looking for a little fresh meat, and found it," I said, pitching my cigarette into the street and walking into the alley. My booties, the little white covers they tell you to wear on a crime scene, made the angry tissue paper noise as I walked over uneven cement and a graveyard of discarded things. My eyes were down, taking it all in, and I saw the girls' leavings, even as they meshed so well with the other alley junk. Here was a lipstick next to a payday wrapper. Here was a bracelet, still sitting cheek and jowl with a Pabst Blue Ribbon can. There was an address book next to a used condom that the forensic boys had been sweet enough to circle with chalk, so even an old bloodhound like me could find it. These were stepping stones along the way, though, and as I hunched over the cold body of Lisa Summer, I knew this was different than your usual call-girl killings. Lisa's dress was red. In parts, it was a sexy red, but in others, it was a wet and bloody red, as her own blood dyed it with the drying. Her dark hair was fanned out behind her like seaweed, and the face it framed looked almost at peace. Her lips were parted in an O of surprise, and it went well with the raw red little bow across her throat. The flesh had parted angrily, and now all that was left was a clotted wound where a soft neck had once been. Whoever had done this had opened her throat neatly and without a fight, and simply laid her in the alley to bleed out, left her to die with help only a short distance away. I stood up and saw the garish green graffito that leered down at the girl as she died. Someone had probably written it while her dying eyes watched them, and it was hard not to see it reflected there. They hadn't had to leave that, no more than they'd had to leave it at the other 3 crime scenes. But they had. We would probably never have known that they were connected if they hadn't. But I didn't think this was a calling card, honestly. To me, it always sounded like a warning. The Green Man comes. "Who do you reckon this Green Man is?" Jeffries asked, but I just shook my head. We had been looking into it since the first message had appeared, and all we could find was some vague pagan beliefs in a forest deity. The Green Man in those paintings had been a smiling thing with a beard of moss, not likely to be the one killing prostitutes and college students like this one was. Perhaps this was the name taken by some serial killer who was leaving these bodies for us. Perhaps it was just the ramblings of some madman. Who could say? I supposed I would have to say soon, or I might be out of a job. Any chance a camera or something caught sight of our murderer? I asked, not expecting much. As it happens, Jeffrey said, there was a camera across the street when Miss Summer was approached by who we assume was her attacker. He took out his phone, one of those new ones with a screen a little smaller than my TV, and clicked around until he found what he was looking for. What he was looking for turned out to be grainy footage from a security camera across the street, from the spot where a group of streetwalkers were selling their wares. I knew of it. We had made a few busts there, but the client in question wasn't driving some fancy sports car. He was on foot, dressed in a long coat, and his hair appeared long and pale. He spoke with her, standing close, but always away from the camera. And when they left, all we got was a look at his back. Well, it's something, I suppose. At least we have some idea who we're looking for. If he's even the one we're looking for. Regardless, I suppose if he isn't the killer, then we should look around for him, see if he knows anything. It was something, and it would give me something to bring to the tech guys at the station. Maybe this fellow was in the register. Maybe he had a record. Maybe his parents had even taken him to one of those mass registration events in the 90s, and we'd have his prints on file or something. I hope so, because as it stands, we have 3 victims and nothing to go on but this security footage. The killer hasn't been nice enough to leave us so much as a fingerprint or a hair fiber, and the chief is starting to ride my ass about it. We'll just have to keep the heat up and hope for a miracle. December 2nd. Another victim was found in an alley last night. Another woman, barely into her 30s. This one was a nurse on her way home from work, Angela Ricketts. She was coming up through the overpass when the same guy on the security footage approached her. We got a much better camera shot from this one, the one on the overpass, because we usually use them to identify people who are sleeping rough out there. There's no real audio, so we aren't sure what to make of it, but she left with him and walked to the other side of the overpass. That's where we lost her, but we found her again not too long after. Someone reported a body at about 6 a.m. the next morning. No one has reported her missing. She was a grown woman living by herself in an apartment block 3 blocks from the hospital. The report claimed it was someone in pajamas, one foot sticking up over the edge of a dumpster. Turned out that they were hospital scrubs, and her shoe wasn't the only thing missing. The foot hanging over the edge of the dumpster was just a leg, and the stump was still oozing blood when we arrived. She'd been done pretty badly. Her clothes had clearly been put back on after they were done. The blood on them was all on the inside, and very little was present on the outside of the garment, besides what had soaked through. She was missing her eyes, her hands, both breasts, and one foot. It was lucky that someone coming along on their way to work had stopped to render aid when they saw us standing around the body. They recognized her scrubs. Angela had a thing about fancy tops, and they said that this was what she'd been wearing when the two of them had got off at midnight. I asked her if she wanted a ride home, the other nurse said through sobs. She said it wasn't that far and she'd be fine. She liked to walk home. It made her feel good to walk through the streets and soak in the ambience. I guess a little of that ambience soaked her in tonight. Angela makes 4, and the forensics guys say it fits the pattern of the others like a hand and a glove. Not just the body either. The killer left a message over the dumpster again. Same spray paint, same placement, same handwriting. I guess, just like all the others, it proclaimed that the Green Man was coming. I heard footsteps behind me, and Didn't have to turn around to know it was Jeffries. You know, the signs keep telling me that this guy is coming. Maybe if he did, he'd leave a little evidence behind so we could identify him. Jeffries laughed, but not because it was funny. It was a bad joke, only to lighten the mood, and I wasn't even sure it did that. Jeffries and I had both been getting our asses crawled. No evidence, no perpetrator, meant no progress in this Green Man case, but what did they want from me? This guy was a ghost, and you can't catch a ghost with good forensics. I figured I'd find you here, Jeffries said, putting a hand over his face to blot out some of the smell. I think I might have found something. Come back to the car with me. The scene is a little much even for me. I nodded, going back to his old police car that was one of the few Cadillacs we still had on the force. Jeffries said it helped him blend in when he was working undercover, but I think the kid just liked to drive around in something that didn't make him feel so much like a cop. I don't know how anyone hasn't put the pieces together yet, but this has happened before. What? Women getting killed and Green Man tags getting left behind? I think I'd remember something like that. No, you probably wouldn't. The last one happened about 4 years ago. The one before that happened 8 years ago. So on and so forth. Also, it wasn't women. The time before this, it was young men. You remember the Uber driver they got out of the woods about 4 years ago? The one who said his girlfriend had been part of some cult. I nodded. Yeah, Jesus, was that really 4 years ago? Doesn't seem that long. Well, the guy we managed to catch from that little fiasco talked about the Green Man too. He said they were trying to make sacrifice to him so he wouldn't come. He said that if they sacrificed 6 people, one for each month of his power, then he would be appeased and he wouldn't walk the earth. He was adamant about it, and a couple of months ago he killed himself in prison, left a note saying that he wouldn't let the Green Man get him when he walked the world again. He thought this thing was coming after him, this Green Man, and he believed it hard enough to kill himself over it. I don't know, man. That sounds like a pretty good connection to me. I scratched my chin. Okay, I suppose that's a pretty good connection, but what does it mean for what we've got here? It's not great. I think whoever this guy is, he's trying to either keep the Green Man from coming, or he's trying to bring him about. He's up to 4, which means that if we don't catch him, he's going to kill 2 more. I don't know if your career can survive something like that, but mine sure as hell can't. I shook my head slowly. No, I got a feeling I'd be on the same breadline as you if I let another 2 women get killed without doing anything about it. Worse than that, I don't think I'd be able to sleep at night knowing I just stepped aside. They got an ID on the guy from the camera footage? Yeah, Jeffries said, as he leafed through the pages. It was rough. Maybe he's only really been in the database because of his credentials, but his name is Edgar Miles. I looked at Jeffries for a moment and finally shrugged. That name's supposed to mean something to me? Edgar Miles? The professor of antiquities at Georgia Tech, Edgar Miles? The professor that got in trouble about 4 years ago for digging on Native American land without a permit and refusing to turn over the artifacts to the state, Edgar Miles? That Edgar Miles mean anything to you? I must not have been involved in that one, I told him and shook my head. How exactly does one go from teaching history class to murdering women in the middle of the night? I don't know, but they say he lost his license and had a couple of his degrees revoked over the incident with the Native American stuff. He comes from money, so he was already as rich as creases, and I heard he was getting into some pretty weird stuff right before he found the Indian burial ground. If he's the one trying to summon the Green Man, then we've got to take him off the street before he kills again. Agreed. Let's set up and we'll go see if we can pick him up. Just what I was thinking, Jeffries said, and we headed back to the station to get the appropriate papers together. It wouldn't be hard to get a warrant for Edgar Miles, not considering that we had him on camera with 2 victims, but I wanted to make sure that this was done right. No chance this slimeball would skate on a technicality. No way some oily lawyer would manage to grease enough palms to get him off on a bad piece of evidence. And no way Edgar didn't ride the needle for this, if I could help it. These killings were brutal, they were targeted, and they needed to stop. December 4th. We had our warrant by the end of the day, but the hard part seemed to be finding Edgar Miles. He had an address, a dingy little apartment in a bad part of town, but after 2 days of staking it out, we had yet to see him come home. We checked the old family homestead, a huge place up in Buckhead, but the new owners said they hadn't seen him or heard of anyone else seeing him. That was a ditto for anyone he might have known at college. Most of them said that they hadn't spoken to him in years, and the few who had said that what they'd discussed made them worried for him. Edgar isn't the person he used to be, said Professor Julius Quinn, another history professor who'd been friends with Edgar. He used to be heavy into preservation, but he knew where the line was. When he dug up those artifacts, I don't think preservation was on his mind. What do you mean? I asked, flipping to a new page. Edgar had become very interested in a shared legend between many different peoples. He said it was some kind of harbinger, a winter spirit that demanded sacrifice, and it was present as far back as the start of written accounts. The Native Americans had something like it, but they refused to talk about it. The site he was digging at had something to do with it. Artifacts and information was what he said. And I think he found something there before the police drug him away. And he hasn't tried to contact you since then? I asked, my look telling him plainly that if he lied to me, he'd be teaching Zoom classes from the local jail. No, Professor Quinn said. And after a moment I looked away and let him sigh happily. I believed him, but I still thought he was hiding something. In the meantime, he'd struck again. A pair of twins this time, Melissa and Madison Kane, went missing from the Georgia Institute of Technology the day before, and no one seemed to have seen them since a party on campus the night after Angela was fished out of that dumpster. Snatching 2 at once was bold, but it also meant that he had his final 2 victims, if the pattern holds. Jeffries says it almost certainly will, but that just means we have to get him before he kills those girls. He's acting hastily, that's why he's been seen this time, and I don't think he expected to have to kill 6 people on short notice. Something is happening here, and I don't like it. We need to find those girls and Edgar, or I'm not sure that any of us involved will have a job next year. December 6th. We found Melissa, but not in the way that we had wanted to. One of the guys that had staked out Edgar's apartment said that he saw a guy matching his description leave the building. They pursued him, but he was on foot, and he got away. We got the go-ahead to check his apartment again, and that's when we found her. I don't know how he got both of them in there, right under our noses, and then got one of them out again, but that seems to be the case. We didn't want to spook him, but that's moot now. Upon entering the apartment, we found a treasure trove of information. He has books and symbols and even some kind of altar in the bathroom. That was where we found Melissa, sitting in a bathtub and covered in blood. She'd been cut up pretty badly. Her ears were gone, her left hand is too, and he'd run his knife over her skin like someone making a patchwork. Jeffries was ready to call the coroner when she suddenly sat up in the tub and gasped, like to scared the hell out of both of us, but we got the ambulance there quick and she managed to make it through so we could get her to the hospital. She just kept screaming and mumbling about her sister, Madison, 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 over and over again. The books and the house, however, were the things that gave us the most information. Edgar, it seems, has been busy. He had dozens of books, all about this mysterious green man. Many of them were in German, a language I couldn't read, but more than a few of them were in English, and his notes were all in English, so that made it easier to decipher. The green man, not to be confused with the pagan deity from ancient times, on that fact he was very clear, was something from outside our world. He had come from somewhere else, but he had come through imperfectly. His form was corporeal most of the time, but he needed energy to make a new one each year. This required sacrifice, but there was another way. This seemed to be the route that Edgar was taking. He had been sacrificing girls to this thing so that it would leave us alone, a story I was very familiar with already. Hadn't I listened to a young college student tell me something similar about 4 years ago? It made me wonder if Edgar had been responsible for that bunch of killings as well. Had he instructed them? Had they possibly been his students? I didn't know, but it was interesting to think about. Something else of interest, too, was the place he intended to sacrifice his last victim. He was going back to the dig site that he had been removed from. He meant to kill her there. The hospital is saying she's stabilized. They don't think she'll die tonight, but it's going to be touch and go. Jeffries must have seen something on my face because he stopped talking and looked at me expectantly. "What time is it, Jeffries?" "About 6 a.m. Why?" "I think he's going to do this thing tonight, and he's going to do it at the old dig site that they kicked him out of. We got to get there, and we need to get there before dark, too." December 7th. It took us far too long to find the site, but we got there before dark. We pulled up in a familiar parking lot, the same one that Jeffries had pulled up to 4 years ago when he broke up the last sacrifice those kids had been doing, and we climbed out hesitantly. These woods seem to harbor dark secrets, secrets better left unspoken. Seems like a lot of our weirder calls come from the stretch of woods between Atlanta and parts unknown. It was ancient, that long stretch of federally protected green, and as I prepared to walk into it with twilight fast approaching, I felt a crawl of apprehension that had nothing to do with the cold that was blowing up. "Ready?" Jeffries asked. "Yeah," I said, looking down as if on cue, and seeing a tennis shoe that someone had left behind. It was a size 6 Nike sneaker, a black one with white laces, the one that Madison Kane was supposed to have been wearing when she was abducted. "Let's hurry," I added, and the two of us went up the trail that would lead us to the site. The path was shadowy, even at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and as we made our way deeper into the woods, I suddenly wished that I'd thought to grab my hiking boots. It had taken us an inordinate amount of time to find the site in question. The college seemed unable to find the information. The police seemed unable to find the information. The Atlanta Archaeology Society couldn't find the spot, and we were running up against it until Jeffries had an idea to call the Park Service. Maybe they remember the incident, he said, and they had gotten us the coordinates in short order. The captain said if we wanted to give him an hour or two that he could get a SWAT team together and that we could roll into the woods with force, but that had been half an hour ago, and we were on crunch time now. "Get them together, but we're going up ahead to see if we can stop him before we have another body on our hands." "We will?" Jeffrey said, but I knew he was on board. He wanted to catch this guy just as much as I did. The sun was a thin line behind the trees as we came to the edge of the site, and I looked at Jeffries to make sure he was ready. His 1911 was in his hand, the weapon looking strangely refined beside my lumpy Glock 19, and we headed into the clearing. The site was still there, the ground cut into tight tiers that descended into the earth. The site was roughly an acre wide, and the pit was shadowy without the lights that would normally be present in a place like this. As we peeked over the dirt sides, I could see something at the bottom. The hole was roughly about 30 feet down, and even from up here, I could hear two things that made my blood run cold: low chanting and soft crying. We switched the lights on our guns, and we put the beams on him as he squinted and put a hand up to block his eyes. "Drop the knife, Atlanta Police Department. Drop the knife, Mr. Miles, or we will shoot." She was kneeling down on a little square of stone, the surface covered in runes and sigils that I didn't think the large man with the knife had had enough time to scrape into them. He was a big guy, looking more like a linebacker than a college professor, and his bald head winked in the light of our flashlights. He had shaved his hair recently, probably how he had gone unnoticed by the surveillance team, and I almost didn't recognize him. He looked up, his face a hectic swirl of doubt and fear, and he raised the knife as he prepared to strike. "Don't try to stop me. This is for the good of everyone. I will complete the ritual. Then I will submit myself to whatever justice you see fit. The thing will not wander the hills of Appalachia this year. Not this year." He was mumbling something as he lifted the knife again, and I could see Jeffries lining up a shot as he prepared to shoot the knife out of his hand. Something came to me suddenly, though, and I blurted it before I could think better of it. "Melissa Kane survived, Edgar. You've already failed. There's no reason to add another murder to your charges. Do the right thing and let Madison go." And he whipped around and looked up at us, so swiftly that I thought he had cut the girl with his carelessness. "You lie! I cut her 100 times. I bled her. There's no way she survived. She's in the ICU right now, fighting for her life. So far, you have 4 murders, an assault with intent to kill, and 2 kidnappings. If you let the girl live, they might take it easy on you. But if you go forward with this, then I doubt there will be any mercy for you." When the knife clattered to the ground, I almost shot him out of hand. He sank to his knees beside the girl, sobbing as he bemoaned his ineffectiveness. We came down one of the earthen ramps, listening to him as he sobbed, and as the girl tried her best to get away from him, I put the cuffs on him and got him as secured as I could manage. Jeffries got the girl, cutting her free as he moved her off, and I got Edgar to his feet as the shouting of the SWAT team started echoing through the woods. I failed. He's coming," he repeated again and again. That's all he ever said after that. All the way to the psychiatric facility in Gainesville, and then later to a high-security psych facility in Tennessee. That was much later, though. For the moment, all we could do was listen to him repeat his mantra again and again. Madison Kane survived her meeting with Edgar Miles, the man the papers dubbed the Green Man Killer. Her and her sister were reunited, and Melissa eventually made a full recovery, though she was never the same after that. The day we took Edgar Miles into custody was when the first of the kids went missing, though, so the bust was bittersweet. They kidnapped 6 kids, all of them between 5 and 6, and only one of them was ever found again. From what the girl they brought out of the woods said, the same woods we found Edgar Miles in as he tried to make his sacrifice, the group had intended to bring forth the Green Man, and it sounded likely that they succeeded, if you believe her. I don't know what any of this means, but I suppose if I'm still pounding the pavement this time next year, I'll have to keep an eye peeled. Who knows when the next sign might appear to herald the return of this mysterious Green Man. You're still here. Thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague here. Always a pleasure to see all my new and old viewers coming by for another one of my spooky tales. If you'd like to support the show, you can always take part in one of our channel offers through Fume or Aura. Or you can just click on another video when they come up. I'd really appreciate it. For our newer viewers, we also have lots of playlists and other things if you'd like to get caught up. I know some of my series have been going on for quite a while. If you'd like to get my latest book, there's a link down below that'll take you to my Amazon page. Towesey Homestead just came out, so if that's something you'd like to get your hands on, go ahead and have a look down there. If you'd like a signed copy, you can go ahead and email me from my email address on the site, and I'll get with you about shipping information and ship you a signed copy. If you'd like to support the channel in a more monetary fashion, we also have membership through YouTube, and we've got a Patreon that you can get the information for in the description. We have lots of tiers and everything to suit your needs. Patrons that support on the $10 tier, that's our Ghostly Reader tier, get a book anytime I write one, signed and on their doorstep. As you may have noticed, there's a list of patrons and members on the screen, and I'd like to personally thank every one of them for taking a hand in the future of this channel. Well, that's enough for tonight. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.